And for more on these elections in Bangladesh, I can welcome Sohela Nazneed, Research Fellow at the Institute of Development Studies in Brighton in the UK. Good morning, Sohela, and thank you very much for joining us. Can I start by asking you, is it fair to say that these elections are a pivotal moment for Bangladesh?
Yes, absolutely. The country is going to the polls after 17 years of authoritarian rule. And this time, this will be a free and fair election. People are very, very excited to vote. There is also anxiety around who will come to power, as your report showed, in terms of the competition being between center-right and then right-wing parties, and what are those implications. But the bottom line is that people are excited that democracy is returning, in the sense that there is a free and fair election and they can cast their vote.
And what are the main issues facing Bangladeshis in the election, both political and social?
Politically, what this vote is about, it's not just about electing members of parliament and the formation of the next government. The parliament that will be elected will be a constituent assembly. And there's also a referendum that's going on that people are voting on, in terms of looking at the issues that will break concentration of power in hands of the prime minister or whoever leads the party. So there are issues on the ballot in terms of term limits, in terms of having another upper house, reforming the system of governance. And that is critical in terms of who makes up the parliament at this time. The other issue that's sort of very critical for the voters is around corruption, cronyism, and also how do you bring economic stability and development for the people? Those are critical areas of concern. Socially, women's rights have dominated the debate in elections in terms of women's role in the economy and the society, but also in politics. We have seen cyberbullying of the women candidates. None of the political parties met the threshold that was provided in terms of nominating at least 5% of the women candidates. That hasn't been followed. But also debates around what should women wear, work hours of women, safety for women, violence against women. So this is going to be critical. It's also an issue around how minority rights would be protected in Bangladesh and creating an inclusive society. So it is a huge critical moment for us Bangladeshis.
Now, the Bangladesh Nationalist Party is expected to top the poll. They were, for a period, barred from taking part in elections under Sheikh Hasina, but they have been in and out of government over the past 5.5 decades. Is there a danger there might be more of the same from a BNP government?
Well, that is something people are worried about. I mean, there is both discussion around would they act differently this time, seeing what has happened to the Awami League if you do excessive corruption and if you misgovern the country. But at the same time, their manifesto looks pretty good in the sense that what they're proposing, but there could have been more. The worry is also that their previous track record, as you mentioned, was tainted by issues around corruption, abuse of power. So will it be different? Will it be different in terms of what they do at the local level? And would they rein in their tendencies? I mean, in Bangladesh, whichever party comes to power, because power is concentrated in the way the system is designed, then you tend to misuse that power. So will they rein in that tendency?
Now, a new player in these elections is the National Citizen Party, which was formed last year by leaders in the 2024 student protests. Can you tell us a little bit more about them?
Sure. The National Citizens Party was formed last year. As you say, they were formed by the student leaders who had basically ousted Awami League. Now, this is a relatively new party. There were lots of expectations about what this party would propose in terms of what they want to see. The party leaders have talked about pushing the July Charter, but also talking about that they would want something different for Bangladesh in terms of it being inclusive, in terms of how it sees, in terms of looking at how power is distributed and breaking the old elite power hierarchy. But having said that, you have to look at what they are also doing. So they went into a strategic alliance with Jamaat Islami, and their reason for that was that they want at least some candidates winning seats, and the BNP did not want to go into an electoral alliance with them. So in a sense, Gen Z that had supported NCP are quite disappointed with the party in terms of what does it mean ideologically compromising. They have lost quite a few of their women leaders who have resigned after the alliance with Jamaat. So whether the strategic game pays off for them and how many seats they win in the parliament, so they are running in 30 seats in the parliament, whether that happens would be critical to see, and what they do in the parliament once they come into power, if they're in an alliance with the right-wing party. So how much they can push in terms of a socially liberal agenda is an issue.
Now, you mentioned there the Islamist Jamaat al-Islami. It has made alliances with not just the National Citizens Party, but a number of other parties. How likely is it that they might become the second force in parliament, and how worried are people in Bangladesh at this possibility?
Okay, so the polls show that it's quite neck to neck between BNP and Jamaat, and polls have shown this repeatedly. Some polls, depending on which polls you trust, and polls are never, you can't really completely trust them because Bangladesh has a first past the post system. What that means is you might get large chunks of votes, but then in terms of seats, that may not necessarily yield results. But it is very likely that Jamaat will win more than what it won before. So before, Jamaat usually gets around 12% of the vote. This time it's showing that at least it will be getting 33 or more. In terms of how that translates into seats, that is something to see, but it will definitely get more seats than what it gets. So usually the maximum it got was 18. That is not going to be the result. So it is very likely that it will become the second party. Its alliance members will, of course, win. But the issue here is that it does have a grassroots support base. So it coming into power doesn't mean everybody's going to be unhappy. But there are concerns around basically what will happen in Bangladeshi politics when you have a right-wing party taking the main oppositional role. Now, if you look at Jamaat's manifesto around economic development policies, or what it will do in terms of its welfare policies, or what it's doing around issues around governance, it doesn't differ very much from the other parties. Where it differs is what it says about the social issues, so around women's roles, around minority rights. The manifesto itself frames around, when it comes to women's issues, in quite a complementary role of gender roles, in a sense that it talks about women's health, welfare, it talks about trainings, it talks about education, but it doesn't talk about equality. And it hasn't fielded a single women candidate saying its members, female members, are still not yet capable. But you also have to look at the statements made by the party rank and file and also the party chief. So it's already been said about in some ways that actually women cannot lead a country, or people are worried that there's going to be a lot of moral policing. While Jamaat formally says that there will be no second-class citizens, but at the same time, and it has fielded a minority candidate, but Jamaat's constitution itself says that no minority can be a leader of Jamaat. So that shows that there are contradictory positions, and it is projecting a moderate image to keep the electoral alliance, but there are very, very conservative factions within its alliance and within the party, and that is a point of concern.
Can I just ask you one final question? How might these elections impact Bangladesh's foreign relations, particularly with regard to to regional powers such as India, China, or Pakistan?
Yeah, there is definitely going to be regional concerns in terms of who comes into power and what that means. Historically, when the Awami League government was in power, our relations with India was quite friendly, but of course it was a one-sided relations in the sense that India benefited quite a lot. People are quite angry that Sheikh Hasina has taken shelter in India, and she hasn't. The extradition requests have not been met. But at the same time, India is quite concerned in terms of which party comes into power. If it is BNP, and India has sent its foreign envoy when he was in Dhaka for Khaleda Zia's funeral. So he had gone to see Tariq Rahman. So there has been friendly overtures. Whether the policy is going to be drastically different if BNP comes to power, that's doubtful, or analysts actually say that. If Jamaat comes to power, what happens, we don't know yet. There is quite a strong anti-India stance, although formally, given India surrounds Bangladesh, how much you would push issues is something to basically see. In terms of China, Bangladesh tries to balance China and India and exists because it is a small country that's sandwiched in that region. And China has a lot of investments, which Bangladesh would want to continue. So it is a critical time to see how this plays out. And also, even though U.S. is not our immediate neighbor, but U.S. geopolitics, obviously, geopolitical positions do influence what goes on. It is one of our biggest trading partners. So it would influence, in a sense, what would go on in Bangladesh.
Thank you very much for that. Sohela Nazneed of the Institute of Development Studies in Brighton in the UK.